There's a little plaque in every Thomas Keller Restaurant Group restaurant in the back room where the chefs work, sense of urgency. So applying that mise en place and that sense of urgency to your supply chain world definitely helps. And it's something that I perhaps brought to the equation later in life versus earlier in my career.
Everyone eats out, but people often miss how the food arrives on their plate. Every meal has a story of growers, suppliers, founders, and operators making it all happen. Welcome to Grounded. I'm Lauren Mitchell, and each week I will bring you conversation with the amazing people behind the brands you know and the ones you'll want to know. Grounded is powered by the Buyer's Edge platform, the leading food service digital procurement network, powered by data, software, and collaborative relationships. Let's get grounded. All right, today's guest is an entrepreneur, supply chain expert, classically trained chef, and U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He oversaw $800 million annual budget and drove company-wide procurement across North America, Asia, and the Middle East at the Cheesecake Factory, and currently the director of supply chain strategy at Levy Restaurants, and most specifically for the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team. Very excited to have you on. Mike Chalmers, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited to talk to you. I think you've got a really unique position right now, but your experience is very deep and diverse, especially on a global level. So I'm excited to unpack supply chain, but also how your culinary focus contributes to how you're working supply chain right now. I think it's fascinating. All right. So how did you get started in food? How'd you get in the business?
Believe it or not, as far back as bagging groceries in high school, I started my food career prior to the Marine Corps with Vaughn's Grocery Company here in Southern California.
Oh my goodness. So you saw it right from the front lines, every item.
I did, for sure.
Oh, okay, great. And then how about the culinary side of things? How did you get into the kitchens?
Gosh, the culinary side was, I'll call it a professional sabbatical or a walkabout. It's something that I always wanted to do. I've been cooking for my whole life, actually. And I want to say 2017 or so at the National Restaurant Association show, I bumped into Chef Thomas Keller at a booth, and he was just amazingly humble and soft-spoken and spoke to you by your name and looked at your badge and so forth. And I was just completely impressed. And I remember telling a colleague at the time, I'd love to work for him one day. So be careful what you throw out there in the stars, because in this case, it came to fruition. I had the opportunity to go to culinary school, or I took the opportunity to go to culinary school. And at the same time, there was a recruiting drive on campus, roughly around the end of my first semester. And all the big players were there, Marriott, Hilton, and so forth. And there was a little tiny blue table with two people, very smartly dressed chef. And it turns out it was Thomas Keller Restaurant Group. And I introduced myself and asked for a tryout, begged for a tryout, actually. And they said, well, come back to us at the end of your first semester and we'll chat. So I did, believe it or not. And had a 4-hour tryout, and at the end of the tryout, Chef David Hassan, my chef de cuisine, they said he wants to see you in the walk-in. And I figured, oh gosh, he's going to let me down easy in the walk-in, so as to not do it in front of everybody else. But they offered me a job, and at that point, I was opening at Bouchon in Yountville and going to culinary school simultaneously. The rest is history. I worked for Chef Hodson at Ad Hoc while commuting back and forth to Pasadena, where I live, for almost a year. And it was just a passion, and to do it for a group of people that I hold in incredible esteem was just a wonderful, wonderful gift.
Was there anything that surprised you getting into the culinary side? I mean, you've worked not only with Thomas Keller, but Mendocino Farms and a lot of these culinary-centric brands. Anything that surprised you as you got further into it?
No, I think having worked for a number of different operators, I I went into the culinary side of the equation with my eyes wide open. I really knew what to expect, particularly from my experience at Cheesecake Factory, where they too have a wonderful, wonderful group of operators that just do an amazing job. So I think I knew what I was getting into.
You knew what you were getting into. How did that influence your move into the supply chain side of the industry where you're at now?
Um, I think that the culinary side really complements, or my
Yeah.
culinary experience really complements the supply chain world, the procurement world, in that your culinary approach, I'm going to call it mise en place, everything in its place, you're organized, you're ready to go. I think when you approach our supply chain business similarly, it definitely helps. So, um, and sense of urgency, there's a little plaque in every Thomas Keller Restaurant Group restaurant in the back room where the chefs work. Sense of urgency. So, applying that mise en place and that sense of urgency to your supply chain world definitely helps, and it's something that I perhaps brought to the equation later in life versus earlier in my career.
Okay, and how about your culinary insight as far as solving supply chain challenges? Can you make a connection of something that you've utilized just from having that thought process and how it contributed to you solving a supply chain challenge?
Having a foot in both worlds definitely helps. So you're able to speak both languages, so to speak. So most recently, I'll use a chicken katsu sandwich that we're selling at Dodger Stadium. Um, Initially, on the ideation process, we were headed down the pork katsu path, and then we went to the chicken thigh path, and then ultimately the breast meat path. And we started with raw, and we worked ultimately to a breast meat par cooked, panko coated katsu sandwich there at Dodger Stadium, which is really exciting and new. I think being able to take what it is the chefs were envisioning and then subsequently go out into the world and source from a different, well, from a several manufacturers, it definitely helps. And at the same time, speaking with the manufacturers, I'm able to go back to the culinary side and say, here are some of our difficulties associated with that decision making. Would you consider this? So I'm able to bridge, I think, both worlds and speak to both worlds better as a result.
Absolutely. I face a lot of calls where both teams are on the call, which I think is a great first step there too. And there's dual engagement in terms of making distribution decisions and understanding, okay, so this spec from this supplier, and how we marry this spec from a different supplier to have them both there at the same time is really powerful. So it's really been interesting for me to get to know you and others that have that kind of dual hat, function.
Sure, continuity of supply is critical, and that's not something we as chefs necessarily think about. We just assume that it's going to be available forever in the quantities that we need it. So, yeah,
Sure, but then also just balancing the creativity and quality with really just the practical realities of sourcing and logistics. I mean, that in itself is a challenge.
without a doubt, yeah, and it's something that we talk about consistently. I think I think the quality piece is achievable 365 days a year. However, seasonality comes into that as well. So you may not necessarily be able to have, you know, that katsu sandwich 365 days a year due to seasonality issues. But we are able to transition into other options with just as much quality. So I think being able to pivot is critical in our culinary world as well as with our supply chain world. Quality is definitely achievable. And there's a number of operators out there that are just doing a fantastic job with quality, but they're remaining nimble on that culinary and supply chain side.
Mike, I'm so curious how the dining is set up and structured within Dodger Stadium. I know every baseball team probably does it a little bit different, but could you give us the high level of what that looks like as far as concessions versus more club dining, let's say, and the flexibilities that you might have with some of the different areas?
Let's start with the two, I'll say, orbiting entities within the building. Shake Shack is an example. That's an agreement with the Dodgers or between the Dodgers and Shake Shack. We assist Jeff, who's their SVP of supply chain. We assist Jeff and his team as needed. However, they maintain all of their forecasting and negotiating, I'll say, processes and practices direct with the PFGs of the world and so forth. Mm. And then I'll break down our culinary world into concessions and premium here within the ballpark. On the concession side, as you would imagine, it's hot dogs, peanuts, Cracker Jacks, nachos, so forth, and the katsu sandwich that I referenced. And then we have the baseline clubs and dugout clubs that are very much chef-driven, culinary-minded, culinary forward, where we're preparing a number of different dishes with a number of different proteins and produce items daily. It changes routinely. Within that, um, I'll say we have much more liberty to go out and pick those seasonal items that I referenced earlier. Go out and pick those items that perhaps there's an opportunity buy on. Um, Conversely, the concession side is very, I'll say, buttoned up from a GPO perspective, where we don't have the liberties to do some of the, I'll say, ad hoc purchases and menu changes.
Where do you draw on in terms of making decisions for new items? And another part of the question, you guys won the World Series last year. Has that made any difference or changes into how you were able to approach the dining for this year in any way?
I want to say we've approached the dining the last couple of years differently. Early on, when we signed Otani and then subsequently Yamamoto, um, we very much anticipated the demographic shift and change within our guests. So as a result, and it's definitely come to fruition. We have a much more or a much larger Asian group or group of guests where their expectations of us from a culinary perspective are much different. So we've really gone out of our way to go out and take a look at other ballparks. Tokyo Giants is an example. What's being offered elsewhere to excite our guests and make them want to come back and spend time with us. So that's very much on the forefront of our ideation. At the same time, we're, as I guess you would imagine, we're all consumers. We're all food consumers, and many of us are on the Instagrams of the world and so forth, where we're watching food pics and paying attention to what other famous chefs are doing, the Sean Brocks of the world, you name it. What's happening out there in the world that's exciting the guests, and then how do we adapt that to Dodger Stadium's offering?
Oh, it's really cool. How are you looking at data too, either in seasons past? I mean, do you look at what teams you're playing and how long the homestands are? I mean, talk to me about some of the different data points.
Yeah, absolutely. The forecasting piece is something that I've been really, I'll say, working on for the past 3 seasons that I've been with the group. We're taking a look at homestands, where in the past maybe we looked at data or forecasting from month to month. Now we're really diving into it by game, by homestand, and even by attendance. What does that katsu sandwich look like with a homestand against, and I hate to say some of these maybe out loud, but a homestand versus the A's,
Yeah.
hypothetically, versus a homestand versus the Yankees. Both are American teams, but American League teams. And the attendance swings wildly between the two. And as you can imagine, so too does the demand.
Yeah.
While we keep in mind that the stadium was built before I was born,
Mhm.
early 1960s. So we have very limited warehousing space. Back then it was just hot dogs, peanuts, Cracker Jacks. Now we have thousands of SKUs, um, multiple different offerings by concession stand. So it's a I'll say a Tetris, if you will, from a warehousing perspective, warehousing and distribution, because we're definitely leveraging our distribution partners to be at our back door 6 days a week during homestands, which definitely helps. But it's a function of our limitations there at the building.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a cool stadium. I've been at Dodger Stadium, and I love how you called out just leaning on the supplier support. Obviously, when it ebbs and flows like that. What is the number one SKU sold overall? Is it a peanut? Is it a hot dog?
It's a hot dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely a
Mm.
hot dog.
Anything special that you served during the World Series last year?
We do actually, we do, I'll say slightly adjust during the World Series. We also have a number of different evenings throughout the year where we highlight different heritage nights. And as a
Oh,
result, if we have, gosh, any number of I'll say ethnicities within the building, we have specific dishes that Chef Christine and her team put together, and we subsequently offer. So it's usually 3 to 5 different things that we offer per I'll say different demographic, including the
yeah.
World Series.
So we've covered a little bit, pivoting between menu items, and I'm curious more on the strategy. Let's back out a little bit. What are some of the risks to start that you're tracking today that possibly others could be overlooking, just in terms of supply chain and food service in general?
I would hate to think that what we're looking at is different from my supply chain peers. We're looking at tariffs. We're looking at domestic versus international sourcing. We're looking at a number of, I'll say, just geopolitical events taking place in the world. And then as a result, you know, how does that impact us? Does that impact us? Do we need to bring production? I'll say our souvenir program. Do we need to bring our production and distribution domestically, or do we continue to work, internationally? Um, so I would venture to say, based on my past life, that definitely other supply chain teams are looking at the same things, using the same data, um, just being smart with what's happening out there in the world. So we're trying to do the same within the Dodger Stadium as well.
And then how do you identify risks or mitigate repeat issues in your role?
So as a result of the tariffs that I mentioned and the current climate, there are potentially suppliers out there. We've experienced a couple that on the supply side, they've been negatively impacted. And as a result, plant closures, insolvency, et cetera. So we really monitor and watch that closely. And then we've started to implement, or we have implemented a number of different KPIs on fulfillment and timeliness and substitutions and so forth. Um, and we've started to publish those KPIs outwardly, both to our distribution partners, our executive team, as well as to the culinary team. Um, hey guys, this is what's happening in our supply chain world. We don't want to do that in a silo. We want to make sure that everybody's armed with what's happening at our back door. So I would say that's how we're addressing our risk mitigation. Um, Maybe it's a bit fundamental, but it's definitely helped.
And how about technology? What does that look like, at least in the last 3 years that you've been there specifically? Have you implemented any tools or technology that's really just changed how you've been able to operate or manage your supply chain?
Sure, processes and systems are something that I'm definitely keen on, big on. In my past life, I had a very wonderful boss that was huge on being informed and being up to date, more so than everybody else at the table. So God bless him for that. He beat that into me about a decade's worth of time. As I mentioned on our call, perhaps last week, we did implement a platform where I'm able to take a look at real time inventory into our distribution partners. The data or the information is only as good as the flow of data into that platform, but we're able to take a look at, hey, here's what we have on order. Here's what we have coming in terms of a homestand. Here's what you have on hand. Here's your lead time. Here's your safety stock. Uh, I'm recommending that we perhaps give that inventory a shot in the arm. So I would say that's definitely a software system or platform that we've implemented to make ourselves better so that we have less churn within the building, and I'll say uh, less excitement from a supply chain perspective.
He may not know the answer to this, or maybe there isn't one, but I'm curious, taking that consideration, that visualization that you have, and understanding kind of the ebbs and flows of volume and demand in that stadium, are you able to make adjustments upstream in your supply as a result of having that visibility? Or maybe that's something you've had all along? Or does it all kind of balance out in you?
When you say make adjustments upstream, are we talking to the supply side?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. In the past, I don't know that we interacted directly with our suppliers. I think we
Yeah.
defaulted relied on our GPO team to do some of that. I feel, in my opinion, is that uh, suppliers have a choice of who they want to sell to when things get tight or when opportunities happen, and I want to be that first person that gets the PO filled. So,
Yeah.
maintaining that direct relationship with our strategic partners or suppliers is very, very critical, in my mind. So, I've definitely made an effort to reach out and touch. uh, I'll say that top, I don't know, the top 20% of our suppliers that represent 80% of our spend.
Definitely. Direct relationship with your suppliers and maintaining relationship. I hear that a lot on here. You can imagine. Okay. I love talking about industry trends and insights, and feel free to put your chef hat back on for this one. Um, where do you see the biggest opportunity for innovation in restaurant supply chain over the next 3 to 5 years?
Gosh, I'm gonna put on my culinary innovation hat since that's my favorite for the moment. Um, I think there's a number of different things happening out in our culinary world, where we see pressures, closures, a number of different things out there impacting the culinary world. However, I see excitement and I see adjustment and pivoting take place within the culinary world at a very grassroots, small level, where young chefs aren't as encumbered with the status quo or encumbered with this is what we've done, this is how we've done it forever. So there's a number of different, I'll say, one-offs or smaller chefs that are doing, I think, some great things that's near and dear to my heart, such as catering. We're seeing the chef Susan Goins of the world here in LA closing restaurants, but pivoting to, I'm calling it quasi catering, and that direct relationship, where you're selling directly minus the four walls on Ventura Boulevard. You're still selling great food. I think even better food, quite frankly, than you would sell perhaps on that brick and mortar establishment on Ventura Boulevard. So I think that's a culinary trend that's moving out of necessity, and I'm really excited to see that. And I've been involved in that a little bit myself as well. And um, I think there's a niche for. I always believe there's a niche for great food. It's just finding it and getting it to your guests.
I think that's a great, I'm going to call it side hustle, because you're continuing to practice and exercise your creativity. You certainly know your numbers in those situations, so it takes the pressure off of going long. And then you know your ingredients because you can menu set ahead of time. That's so cool. And then what's your perspective or on ghost kitchens? I know that's not a new trend. It's more of a evolved out of COVID trend, but especially being in the LA area there, um, you know, what's your take on it? Do you think it'll be around for a while? Do you think it's been a great benefit? Do you think it's something that'll go back away?
The ghost kitchen format is interesting for me, but I think morphing that into perhaps the commissary environment, I think
Mm.
is better. I don't know that the ghost kitchen uh, practice is sustainable long term. I do like the commissary approach, and there's a couple of operators here in town that are ramping up with that commissary. I'll say hub and spoke culinary operation, where they're taking their core items that represent their brand, they're making it in that commissary environment and then shipping it out to their units. I love that. I think that's going to be a key going forward as well to supply chain success and culinary success. Making sure your brand is everything you need it to be, from a culinary perspective, and controlling that in a small environment, I think is going to be the key moving forward.
Okay, given your experience, I know you've touched on the sustainability in your roles, and I'm curious what this really looks like, either in your immediate past or currently, how you're implementing it there with Levy, and anything else you want to touch on around sustainability.
Sure. So it's a strategic imperative or initiative within Levy to have all of our units focus more on sustainability. We at Dodger Stadium in particular are focused on food waste. Um, and as you would imagine, a function of that is forecasting. So myself and my team, we're trying to do a much better job with our forecasting so as to mitigate or at least reduce our food waste within the building. And at the same time, from a seasonality perspective, we're taking a look at with the culinary team what makes perhaps sense at the beginning of the season versus the tail end of the season. And we're doing that also with seafood, pelagic versus farm raised fish and so forth. So, but I'll say forecasting in particular and food waste are the two big buckets that we're working on from a sustainability perspective right now.
That's awesome. Have you guys ever connected with Copia, being in Southern California?
Copia. No.
Okay. I'm going to send you an email to connect you or at least give you a little info from my perspective. I had her on as a guest, and they support with food waste initiatives. But really, what they've done, she actually had a data background. And so she worked starting years ago to help restaurants. And I actually believe Cheesecake Factory is a customer, believe some of their kitchens to understand how much food waste was available at the end of a night or a week. And they could start to draw some patterns around same products, right? Same dishes, and then make some adjustments there. But it's an app that you can roll out nationally, and it connects you to the local food bank. And then you have your closing team go ahead and place the order for pickup, and they deploy the team to go and pick it up. But all of the food waste that you've donated gets measured and sent back to you so that, again, you can have it from a tracking standpoint. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I didn't speak to it perhaps intelligently enough, but we are in fact doing I'll say something similar to that as well, where we have quite a robust infrastructure that picks up and distributes our food at the end of every evening.
very cool. Very cool. All right. So we learned a little bit about Dodgers from this conversation, and also your catering experience. If people want to get a hold of you and either inquire about one of your catering orders or just ask a question, where can they find you?
Sure. I respond for the moment and communicate for the moment on direct messages into my Instagram account. So I underscore cook underscore for you. So I cook for you on Instagram is where I can be reached for the moment. I'll say in large part my catering endeavors have just been word of mouth as I work through some operational, I'll say, challenges. What do I want to do from a packaging perspective? What do I like to see in bento boxes and so forth? So I'm working through some of that right now with a few clients or I'll say guests that I'm working with. As professionally, M Chalmers at LevyRestaurants.com. You're welcome to shoot me an email and reach out and say hi, ask a question, and so forth. And I do my absolute best to respond in a timely fashion um, because I think it's the right thing to do. So you're always welcome.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to finish with what I call the final mile. It's a few quick fire questions, and just answer them to the best that you can.
Gotcha.
To the next generation, what is your recommendation that you're willing to share? Those that are coming into supply chain procurement or the food service space.
Patience, patience, and patience. Yeah, and there's wonderfully bright people entering the supply chain space as we speak, and I think, um, gosh, just apply some of that wonderful knowledge and some patience, and you'll succeed.
All right. How about something that you learned very early on in your life, either bagging for Vons or working at Trader Joe's or any of your previous early stints that's strangely relevant to what you're doing today?
Definitely as far back as, Vaughn's up to Thomas Keller Restaurant Group. Um, Even I had a semi quasi mentor in David Gordon at Cheesecake Factory, where he once told me that you have 2 ears and one mouth, use them in that ratio. So I find that wonderfully applicable now, and I certainly found it applicable way back when I had a number of different mentors. Mike, listen, listen, and listen. So pays dividends.
Patience and listen. I love it. And then finally, what has been your proudest moment, at least so far in life?
Strangely, maybe to some, my proudest moment professionally, I'll have to silo those personally and professionally. But professionally, one of my proudest moments was I was working at Bouchon in the morning, about 6 a.m., and just head down going, hair on fire. And I turned the corner and I bumped right into Chef Thomas Keller. And he stood back and gave me a fist bump and he said, "Good morning, chef," to me. Um, I, I, I finished my shift and I called home to my wife and I said, "You will not believe what happened. I just bumped into Chef Keller and he said, 'Good morning, chef,' to me." I consider myself to be a cook. But it was just a pinch me moment that I was very, very proud of because I worked incredibly, incredibly hard and made a number of different personal and professional and financial sacrifices to do that. And to get to a level where I'm cooking for Chef Keller was just pretty incredible.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that one. All right. Well, we'll include your Instagram handle in the show notes. I'm so grateful to have had this conversation. Thank you so much, Mike. You've been wonderful.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you, listeners. If you learned something today, please share this podcast with a Dodger fan or other industry supporter. This has been another exciting episode of Grounded. See you next time.
That's a wrap on this episode of Grounded. We've covered a lot of ground as we explored what it really takes to run food service behind the scenes. For show notes, highlights, and our latest market insights, visit us at groundedonthepod.com. Grounded is powered by the Buyer's Edge platform, delivering smarter solutions, greater efficiency, and real savings through connected tech, powerful data, and industry expertise. For more information and to get a personal demo of the Buyer's Edge platform, email me at lauren.mitchell@producealliance.com. And if you liked what you heard, subscribe so you don't miss an episode.